Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
This episode of the Sports Spectrum podcast with Donnie Bostwick, the Oklahoma Wesleyan University men's basketball coach, is brought to you by Compassion International. Childhood for every single kid should be full of exploration, learning, and growth. But there are children in poverty who are often focused simply on just living day to day. We're talking about safe water, education, medical care, and even safe housing being substandard or non-existent, resulting in malnutrition, child labor, abuse, and hopelessness. Poverty, such a vicious cycle. But there is hope and it can be broken, and that's where Compassion International comes in. For just $38 a month, your chance to release a child from poverty. Compassion, over 66 years of experience, and they've found the most effective way to care for children in need is through the local church. And that's why we partner here at Sports Spectrum with Compassion International, and they partner with more than 7,000 local churches in 25 countries to deliver God's love and care to children in need. One child at a time, more than 2 million children are breaking the cycle of poverty for good because of Compassion International. Listen, if that's not worth it, I don't know what is. $38 a month, the best $38 you'll spend every single month. Release a child from poverty and sponsor them through Compassion International. Here's the website, compassion.com/sports spectrum. Compassion.com/sports spectrum. Sponsor a child today. Today on the podcast, we welcome Donnie Bostwick to the show. He coaches men's basketball at Oklahoma Wesleyan University, NAIA school, and a member of the NCCAA National Christian Collegiate Athletic Association. And Donnie, listen, he's a legend. He led his team in 2009 to the NAIA Division II National Championship, and they won a record 39 consecutive games. And while he was at Southwestern Assemblies of God University, he led them to the national championship game in 2013. He's a two-time NCCAA National Coach of the Year in 2010 and 2013, and the NAIA National Coach of the Year in 2009 and in 2010. He returned to Oklahoma Wesleyan in 2017, and just this past March in 2019, he saw his team return to the NAIA Division II men's tournament. Cool thing about Donnie is he's also the founder of a great ministry called Spirit-Led Coach. Spirit-Led Coach, and we'll tell you all about that here in the podcast. Lots of fun, lots of good coaching nuggets, leadership nuggets, and great storytelling from Donnie Bostwick, Oklahoma Wesleyan University men's basketball coach, here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Coach, welcome to the program.
Hey, I'm really honored to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to talking to you. And it was last month, basically, not too long ago, that March Madness ended. The Final Four was over, and Virginia won their first title. We covered Tony Bennett and his ride for a long time during those few months on Sports Spectrum and on our website at sportspectrum.com. I'm just curious now that we're just a few weeks removed from that Final Four, what your thoughts were and what you saw between, especially with Texas Tech and Virginia in that final championship game was pretty great. What were your thoughts?
I did have Tech in the finals. So Virginia, I had losing to Tennessee. So I knew, defensively, toughness-wise, those two teams obviously defensively make, everybody was wondering if they were going to get 50 points between them. So after last year, goodness, it seemed like destiny. It was just meant to be. Yeah. No matter what, had to happen. Purdue game, Gardner-Webb even, and then you go through and you sit there and go, they're going to get beaten somehow, some way. It seems so much on destiny, more than I've ever seen it.
We're going to talk about your faith in a second. Certainly you're an outspoken man of faith and coaching for Christ. But what are your thoughts on Coach Bennett and just seeing him on the platform that he has, the biggest platform there is in college basketball, and just having a gentleness about him, but an unashamed spirit about making sure that people know where his hope is found?
I think he's set the marker high. I think he's turned into the Dabo Swinney of basketball, college basketball. So many other coaches, I felt like, almost took a page out of his playbook. And that's who he is. But I was so impressed, as you went along, Coach Beard, and how his team and some of his players boldly stood in their faith after the game. Whenever Auburn lost, I couldn't even be ever more impressed with how they handled, and how they handled the defeat right there with a tough call or two. That was more impressive, almost in some ways, as the other guys that were having the success, and how they handle it. But Tony Bennett, I mean, he's, like you said, he's so eloquent. He's so sincere in his faith. Last year, after the defeat, I've never probably seen any more, any bigger. I always say praise him in a pit, and he'll put you in the palace. And he praised him in that pit, and man, did he make it to the palace.
I was just going to – that's a great way to put it. Praise him in the pit, and he'll put you in the palace. How have you seen that in your journey as a coach? You've reached the top of the heap in your profession and what you've done. You won an NAIA Division II and a national championship in 2009, so you know what that's like to reach the top in your profession. But how do you get your guys, buying into learning from the losses and praising him in the pit? What does that look like for you? I love that line, by the way.
Joseph, that was him. Yeah, it showed up one day where things didn't go his way, and so he had options. He just continued to praise God, and that taxi cab showed up and took him to the palace. It first went to a prison, one more time before he made it to the palace. But in my life, I've had miscarriages and was told I couldn't have children. And through a miracle, we have 4 kids. I've lost my job, a job that I thought I was going to get. I coached, I played at a school, and then I was there 10 years. And it just didn't work out. I had a different plan. But, I started off in 7th grade girls basketball as a volunteer coaching. I've been at every level. And so my dad passed away of cancer. I've seen him do some amazing – God's done some amazing miracles. And then at the same time, Dad was healed in a different way. He actually won the battle by going to heaven. And so I've been in some pits, and just from experience, I know, as I've praised him through those pits, I can't even explain the next level of the mountaintop he's taken me to. And we always talk about glory to glory. It'd be great to go from mountaintop to mountaintop. And I've had a 39, game winning streak where we didn't lose a game for a single year. And that followed a pit. It was coming after not getting the job it was my plan that I thought I was going to get. He gave me a job that was probably one of the worst jobs, college jobs in America. Oklahoma Wesleyan at the time, they'd had 6 straight 20-loss seasons. The school had come through a time of struggle financially, and that's the job I ended up landing. And he was just telling me he was going to do something with nothing. Told my wife and I both, and so that way he would get the glory, and everybody would know there's no way possible that I could do anything to that magnitude. And definitely have been in a few pits, a few valleys. One of my favorite verses, chapters in the Bible I memorized is the 91st Psalms. And though you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, he will, fear no evil. He'll be there with you. And those valleys are there, but I think it's a valley for a reason. I know water goes to the lowest point, and so sometimes you feel like you're in the bottom of that valley, and you don't have nothing. You're just dry, and all you have to do is dig down. You want to look up, and instead you dig down, and that's where you find often the answer to your prayers, and it's on your knees most of the time.
And it's such a great way to say it, Coach. And I wonder, though, because I think from a worldly perspective, from maybe the outside looking in, even some believers thinking this, that when you say he'll put you in a palace, that means he'll take you to a national championship like it did with Virginia. And listen, that Virginia, rags to riches, if you will, story is going to be told for years to come. I think it'll be sermons in youth groups for years to come. But sometimes that put you in a palace doesn't necessarily mean wins and losses or success from a worldly point of view, right?
That's a great point. I think whenever I couldn't have children, I had 2 miscarriages. I went in to hear my son's heartbeat, and both times, there was no heartbeat. I'm winning basketball games at the time. I just got a high school head coaching job. My dream's coming true, and yet life is just as bad or worse than it was before. As my dream of having kids and having a big family was even, what was fame or riches or wins going to get me? I thought it was, in high school and in college, whenever I was being successful as a player, it did bring me some fame. It helped me get a girlfriend. It gave me that, things that everybody wants. Everybody wants friends and people liking them because they're successful. But when that all goes away and you're sitting there going like, man, I may not be able to have children. A lot of people go through challenges like that. One of my favorite verses is James 1:2, consider adversity pure joy. And what happened was whenever I didn't get, the plan I was hoping or I thought was going to be my plan, I took this job because I didn't have a job. I turned this job down 4 years prior to that because I looked at it like, I'm in a way better situation. I'm going to get this job. And then I didn't have a job. And now this job is a good job opportunity because you don't have one. And God told me at that point, if I would keep him at 51% or higher, that he would take care of me. If I would apply principles like John Wooden and Vince Lombardi did, he gave me 10 biblical principles to apply, and I knew I couldn't do what was going to be needed to win with what we had scholarship wise at the level that we had already won. I'd won a national championship as an assistant coach. And so I went into it, I was like, all right, God, I will sacrifice some video sessions and player development things and things that I normally thought we have to do to win, and I'll make sure you're first and keep you there. And he took care of it. We went 120-20 the next 4 years, won a national championship, won 39 consecutive games. And it couldn't have happened. It was just straight up miracle.
Donnie Bostwick's our guest here on Sports Spectrum's podcast, the Oklahoma Wesleyan University men's basketball coach. And there's probably some listening, Donnie, who don't know what Oklahoma Wesleyan University is or where it is, obviously, other than being Oklahoma. Just share a little background on the university, the level of basketball that you're coaching, just a little more information so it gives our listeners a little background on yourself.
Okay, Oklahoma Wesleyan University is in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Just north of Tulsa, about 30 minutes. It's an NAIA university, NAIA, National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics. Scholarship-wise, the Division I NAIA is on the same level as NCCAA Division II. NAIA Division II is what Oklahoma Wesleyan is currently, and that means we have a 6 scholarship level, where NAIA Division I has 11 scholarship level, and NCCAA Division II has a 10 scholarship level. But we have like a 25-2 record during my time here over NAIA Division I schools. We last year beat Missouri Southern, a top 10 NCAA Division II school. I did the same thing whenever I was at Division I at Southwest Assemblies of God University for 6 years prior to coming back to Oklahoma Wesleyan. And so I've been at the NAIA level. I grew up going to camps at Oklahoma Christian University, Oklahoma Baptist University, and wanting to be like those coaches. I played a little junior college basketball as an All-American NAIA player and won a national championship my senior year. So I've been blessed. I really enjoyed this level because I feel like it is about the players. It's about the journey. It's about getting an education, but it's great basketball. I've got 5 NAIA players of the year, probably 10 who have played professionally. Some of them are still playing professionally overseas. One of my players won an NBA D-League championship. He's playing in UC Marcia now in the Euro. He had 38 and 18 in an NBA D-League game, so that's pretty good.
Yeah, I'd say so. And that gives me I think it gives our listeners a good idea of the level of basketball. So tell us about, as a coach, maybe as you're growing up, I know you shared a little bit about wanting to coach and a desire to coach. And you even said Vince Lombardi and John Wooden, which are two of the best ever to model after. But who are some of the guys that you modeled your career after that you saw and you were like, okay, I want to kind of be like that guy as you came through the ranks, maybe in the early 90s when you were starting to coach?
I started probably with Dan Hayes, Bob Hoffman. Dan Hayes, Hall of Famer, Oklahoma Christian University. Bob Hoffman was the head coach at Mercer not too long ago, beat Duke. He was at Oklahoma Baptist University. I went to camps growing up and watching those coaches, seeing the impact they had, that they still was able to share their faith and impact me in that sense. But watching, obviously, the NBA and then NCAA, you start picking out coaches that you want to emulate and you like the way style of play they have. And as I've kind of, followed the style of play, I enjoy watching and taking things from certain programs. As I got older and I started learning a little bit more about the details of the game, I've kind of changed my perspective a little bit. I remember looking back on the days where Tom Osborne, Tom Landry, those coaches, the way they carry themselves, even the highest level at the NFL or the college football, I saw the impact they were making. Bill McCartney at what he did at Colorado, and then obviously following that with the Promise Keepers and everything had a huge impact on what I saw my opportunity would be. My father, he would have loved to have been a coach, but he didn't have a dad. Lived with his high school coach. His mom wasn't a lot in the situation, so he was just a hardworking guy who gave me a chance that a lot of his family didn't have. He didn't have, so he was coaching our church league, basketball league. He was coaching softball. He was, both playing and coaching and all those. So I grew up. That was kind of my Disney World, was being at a softball field or a basketball gymnasium pretty much 6 nights a week. And he had a huge impact on me. Nobody really ever came out of Pryor, Oklahoma. Nobody came out of our family to go to college, much less anybody out of our county to play college basketball or anybody of our high school that I knew of. And so when I dreamed about that as a kid, most of the time people would try to put me in my box and say, that doesn't happen at this, people don't come from where you come from, that side of the tracks or whatever else you want to say to make it. And so I had to think bigger than that. My father had to push and believe in me. And then I saw those coaches, he was a bricklayer. And so he would take me to, at age 16, I'm pushing a wheelbarrow and throwing a lot of stones around and bricks around. And he's saying, you're either going to do this for a living or you're going to go and push yourself and do things that, get your education and move on and chase your dreams. And he couldn't hand me that with a silver spoon. So he gave me a hard work ethic. My mother passed on a crazy faith. And that combination, and I started searching out coaches that had that same kind of impact. And very blessed to be a part of programs and see those programs growing up. And my goal was, how can I pass that on to other young athletes? How can I help them, achieve their goals and dreams? Because, I didn't really do that a little bit. I thought personally I was like anybody else. I was chasing the rat race. I was wanting to see how high I could go in the coaching ranks, and I was willing to work hard enough and scout and recruit back before cell phones. And I'm taking 4 kids and going 5 nights a week, either scouting, recruiting, or playing games. And my wife's willing to, chase that dream with me a little bit, or she's crazy enough to marry me. Got a calling card. I'm pulling over and calling kids on pay phones with I get to memorize the number, in my head after you have to go through and calling those recruits, stopping by every other get and go to do that on the way home from those trips. And thank goodness for Synergy and all the technology we have now in recruiting and everything, so we don't have to worry about traveling quite as much as we did back then.
Man, that sounds like just an insane type of lifestyle. Where's faith for you, Donnie? It sounds like you said your mom, strong woman of faith. So it sounds like you were raised in the faith, but there's always a difference. I tell people this all the time who are raised in the faith, even with my daughter now being raised in the faith. I say, eventually you're going to have to make the decision to walk with the Lord, that's your decision, not the faith of your parents that you're riding on. So at what point or at what crossroads did you have to come to that realization for yourself?
It's a really neat story. My mother, her dad was a moonshiner, and she was, obviously not raised in church at that point in her life. And as she and my father met after high school, she was just working car hop, and my father was working construction and stuff. And once they got married, Mom got pregnant, had my older sister, and she found Christ. She wasn't highly educated or anything, but she truly had an incredible encounter with Christ and really changed her life. And she wanted to make sure her kids were raised in church. So she was going to church and paying her tithes against my dad's wishes. He was still, going to, I guess, to play a lot of pool. I'd say the pool hall or whatever you want to call it. And he was sports gambling a little bit, or too much anyway. And he lost. And he told my mother that the bookies had taken him and showed him a house that had blown up and said that you're next. And he told Mom to go ahead and take the kids and leave. And Mom's, once again has kind of a really strong faith. And she said she was going to pray instead. And the night my dad was going to have to pay, the bookie called and said he had been drugged to church and got saved. And my dad didn't owe him anything. So my dad became a believer. I think that's how that term actually, sooner or later you will believe. I believe strongly in that. So my story behind that would be my mother has this faith that she every night prayed, and I would hear her praying for my mom, my father, or her father, her brother, a lot of our family that hadn't found Christ yet, and she was that war room lady. So the problem was, I lived off her prayers, and then so I married somebody like that, and I went to church, obviously a lot, but I never read my Bible. I never fasted. I just went to church and just kept getting spoon-fed, on Sunday morning from our pastor, and I didn't really grow and mature past that. I drove the church bus. I did all the little things I felt like were good, and I wasn't doing anything negative. I really wasn't experiencing what I do now. And what I know now, and my wife's prayer was that I would become the spiritual leader of my home, and I didn't know that. But what happened was I'm sitting in my office one time. I had a friend who was a college basketball assistant coach. KJ Johnson was his name. His dad played for Henry Iber at Oklahoma State. The guy, 6'7", married Miss Junior Miss Oklahoma, just oozed God in the coolest fashion possible. Just a dear friend. He was in March of 2009. We had just won the national championship. KJ had played a big part in encouraging me during that time period, because we were the 31 seed out of 32 teams to get in the tournament, the NAIA tournament, which some incredible players. John Wooden coached in, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman. A lot of incredible players played in it. So we're up at the tournament, and KJ comes running up to me. We walked into this banquet with 32 teams there, and he's like, Donnie B, what's up? And he just oozed God always in the coolest way possible. And I'm like, man, I can't believe we're here. I can't believe we're dancing. And didn't think we were going to make it this year. We actually sent our guys home because like 4 teams had to win their conference tournament, or we wouldn't have been here. And it all played out. Now we're here. And he's like, what are you talking about? Like, you're probably going to win this thing, man. I've seen God in you my whole life. And I'm just like, man, keep talking. That's in March. Well, December 31st, I get a call. I'm sitting at my desk, probably recruiting, because I had to go up to my office to call. And I get a call from a friend. They said, you hear about KJ? And I'm like, no. What happened? He had a basal tip brain aneurysm. He came in from a jog, and he's not going to make it. And so I'm sitting there at my desk. I hang up the phone, and I'm just mad. I'm just hollering out at God saying, why him? I deserve this. Why would you let this happen? And I was hollering out, and just kind of giving God the business of like, why? And he told me, I felt like I heard the words fight. And I was like, oh boy, I know what that means, because I watched my mom fight, and intercede But I had, at that point, had never, like I said, I'm 30 years old. I hadn't traveled hardly at all. I hadn't seen a palm tree in my life at that point. And I'm riding a church bus, but I hadn't fasted. I never cracked the Bible open. I just kind of like got fed by my pastor on occasion, you know, and I'm sitting there saying, okay, I'll fight. If you'll do something here, God, and heal KJ, I'll fight. So I started fasting. I started going in and letting his brother and his wife know that I believed God was going to do a miracle, and it clotted. The blood clot clotted, so it didn't kill him immediately. And only 2 doctors in the United States would touch him, one in San Francisco, one in Chicago. But they said he had died 3 times. He wasn't going to make it. They given him 0 chance. And I just kept knowing, you know, the voice of truth kept coming on a song of Casting Crowns at the time. Yeah. You know, you watch the Facing the Giants movie, and that was kind of a story of my life at that time. And then at the closing of the movie, the words that go down with all the trailer, there's the voice of truth playing again. And that song would just give me, I'd be in my truck at 2 a.m. trying to be praying for him just to get out of the house so I wouldn't wake up my wife and kids or anything. And, you know, I used to think like, man, heaven's probably, you know, if it's like a boring church or we're going to go holy, holy, holy all the time, what's it actually going to be like, you know? How can it be that great? You know, I think God, you know, he talks about having mansions and streets of gold. So there's you know, more that's going to be going on, I believe. But, you know, I just try to wrap my head around that. But I'm in a truck one night praying for KJ as he's getting flown out to San Francisco, and he's going through all this over that about a month period. And I felt like, man, God just dropped a drip of presence in my truck. And I could have never let that truck have been fine with that the rest of my life. And I'm like, man, if that's just a drip, I get it. I finally got a taste of what it's really about. So KJ came home on February 14th. So from December 31st to February 14th, I'm going through this spiritual high experience that I really had ever experienced up to that point in my life. And I go into coach's office. I was assistant coach and tell him, hey, I'm going to run over to Oklahoma Christian because we're playing them that night. I'm going to go to Edmond. That's where KJ lived. And I'm going to see him before the game. I'll meet you at the game. And coach, sit down. He says, you need to sit down, Donnie. And I said, okay. And he said, well, I know you're not going to understand this, but his son was a Division I assistant at the time, and their staff had gotten fired. And so he said he was going to retire, and I'd been with him over 10 years. And he was like, I know this wasn't the plan, but I'm going to help my son get this job. And so I should have been frustrated with that based on, you know, the amount of time I'd put in on a limited salary, you know, chasing my dream. Yeah. But instead, God just gave me a crazy peace. He spiritually prepared me. And he started telling me and my wife he was going to make something out of nothing. And so the only job I turned down, I mean, I got second in some tremendous jobs during that time period, but it was Oklahoma Wesleyan, believe it or not. And that job came open again. And God told me, like I said, if I apply his principles of holding the 51%, and that's kind of how I landed where I am. And I changed, you know, my faith. I started experiencing what it's really like to walk a life with Christ that's favored and has, you know, one of the principles of those 10 principles, and this is, I think, a really good one, was the second mile principle called the Roman mile. And, you know, and Jesus says not only go the first mile, but go the second mile and do it in love and do it for me. And, you know, that sounds like touch the line to me in a sprint, a yo-yo or something. It didn't seem like it was anything more important than that. But I was listening to an FCA breakfast one morning, and the guy said, you know, what that actually meant was a Roman had the legal right to tell a Jewish man or a Jewish boy to carry his armor 1 mile. And if he didn't do that, he'd be flogged. And so who's going to go a mile carrying somebody's armor, you know, 60, 70 pounds, and then turn around and go another mile? You know, I think anybody that's human is going to be like, I'm done. I'm going to go one extra step so I don't get flogged. I'm going to go back to what I was doing. I'm probably not going to be real happy about doing it. And God says, like, go another mile. Jesus says, do it in such a way that they see, you know, my love. And that favor is just waiting on us to be dropped once we go that second mile. But very few people ever go. And so I started teaching my players to do that and applying these principles, many of those same principles, John Wooden and, like I said, Vince Lombardi. How would you not want to follow the success of those guys?
Yeah.
Coach Wooden, just a real quick story there.
Yeah, please.
I was in FCA. My son was 1 year old. He's a miracle. He was born, like I said, August 31st, 2006. And he was blonde hair, blue eyed, and left handed, which is exactly what we prayed for. And so on. After we had the miscarriages, we wrote down exactly what we wanted. And so we're over, and Coach Wooden, was holding my son. I got a picture of him in my office right back here behind me, of him holding my son. God kind of has these ways of putting fingerprints on stuff. So whenever I told you about my trip to 2005, that would be 2005, 8 years later, I had my second son, same birthday, blonde hair, blue-eyed, and left-handed, and we win the national championship that year. We went to the state finals after I heard my son's heartbeat in 2000, and the first time my son was born. So, he honestly repeats things and makes things so coincidental that you almost have to be a fool not to believe something special is going on with things like that. And so my wife, I tell my wife, we're going to have more kids. She says, no, that ain't happening. So instead, I go into a pit and don't get the job I thought I was going to get. And what happens out of that? I actually become who I think I'm supposed to become spiritually. And, Jason, it just doesn't add up. I mean, the math never even comes close. When you start really, truly seeking him, he says, draw nigh to me and I'll draw nigh to you. And if you do it with all your heart, the things that he's done, I hadn't seen a palm tree. Now I've been, through basketball, I've been to Africa, Asia, Hawaii, Alaska, all over the United States, Central America, all paid for, and all it doesn't even add. I had to scratch myself just to make sure I'm still not believing this is a dream. It's just that true.
Oh, that's such good stuff there. Donnie Bostwick's our guest here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Before we close down ship, Donnie, and we could talk for hours, and we'll definitely get you back sometime, maybe in the fall. Maybe we could even do it in person at some point. But I want to ask you about Spirit-Led Coach. I know that's near and dear to your heart. It's something that you founded. I guess you'd call it a ministry in a lot of ways. Other than anything else I could think of, that word ministry comes to mind. So tell us about Spirit-Led Coach.
I'm going to break this down as a real quick story if I can.
Yeah.
It started about 4 years ago. I did a Nike clinic probably 8 years ago. And when you do a Nike clinic, they ask for you to write down what you're going to speak about, and they end up putting it in a booklet and pass it out to coaches in the next Nike clinics. They hand this booklet out called Nike Coaches Champion booklet or something like that. So about 4 years later, I get a call from a coach, and he says, "Hey, I saw your booklet about how to win with less, and it was really good. And you said there's a secret in the sauce, though, with these 10 biblical principles that God gave you. They removed the principles. Could you give those to me?" And I was like, "Sure." Where you from? He said, "Colorado," the high school coach. And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I went to junior college in Colorado." He said, "Oh, okay, where at?" And I said, "NJC." And he said, "My brother went there. When did you go?" So I graduated in 89. He said, "Man, he went in 90. He went in 89. And I said, "Well, who's his roommate?" And he said, "Swanee." And I said, "That was my roommate." So his brother went into my bed in the dorm.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, God, you got to have fingerprints going on here somehow, some way, shape, or form. And I was blessed to do USA basketball under 19 that summer in Colorado Springs. And I said, "Hey, I'm going to be out there this summer." He asked me if I'd come to a camp for him. I did. It was a really fun time. He spent 3 extra days while I was out there doing a camp. I spent one night till about 3 a.m. just speaking with his son, who was a junior, about God, and just a good time. Went home. He was always asking me, and we built a relationship for, hey, send me a YouTube, send me anything that you get about God. So we built this relationship. He started an FCA, started a youth group, and they had a real good run his son's senior year in the state tournament. And then he was fired because he was praying too much with the kids. And so I felt bad because I was like, man, I really encouraged him to do all this. And he said, no, it was the best experience of my life. And he ended up taking another job about an hour and a half away, took a leap of faith financially, made that jump. His best friend coached the girls there, and his daughter was a junior. So he Colorado's cost of living and housing is very expensive. So he had grown up in this other town. Now he was moving out of his house and going to go take a risk, I guess, financially. So a year and a half later, he called me and said, "Hey, would you come back out and do another camp for us out here?" And I said, "Sure, I'd love to." Went out, did that. He said, "Well, what you need to know is my friend, his wife had a heart attack. Had an issue with her heart they didn't know about, and she passed away about 3 years ago. And so, he's sometimes struggles with that. I don't know how he's going to handle the God side of what you bring and everything. Just understand he's a great guy, but, right now he's still struggling with that." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I completely understand, obviously." So I went out and did that camp, and, man, it was just, we hit it off great. So I came home, been thinking it's about a 4-year time period. And last year, I'm back at Oklahoma Wesleyan. 2 years ago, I came back. I went down to Texas and coached 6 years at another university, and had the opportunity to come back. And I'm sitting here. A professor that our business department takes students for college credit to Israel and in Spain and some different places. And he called and said, "Hey, would you like to go to Israel?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's a bucket list. That would be incredible." But I had a couple cars in the shop, and I honestly didn't have the camps as large going yet, basketball camp-wise here, because I was coming from Dallas, a bigger area. And so I was like, man, it's a little bit tight financially, I probably can't go. And so I got off the phone, and my wife had called, and I said, "What's going on?" And she's like, "Come home." I was like, "Come home? What's going on?" She's like, "Come home now." So I went home. She said, "Who's Clint?" And she has a card in her hand, and I'm like, "That's my friend out in Colorado, the coach that I went out and did a couple camps for." She says, she's kind of crying. She says, "Read the card." And I'm like, "Okay." So I read the card, and it says, "You spent one night with my son and really helped change the direction or even, increase his commitment to Christ that night. You spent a week with one of my best friends, and I saw the joy come back into his life." And I'm like, "What?" He says, "You've been sending me YouTubes, and messages and stuff for, especially since I moved out here, we really didn't have a church. So that's really what we were doing. A lot of your stuff was what we were doing as a family, spiritually." And I'm like, just blowing me away what I'm reading. And then he says, "I took a really financial risk and moved out here, and I was getting to the point where it was, really challenging financially for my family, and God just came through in a major way, and blessed them financially." And he sent me. He said, "God told me to bless you as well." And so I won't go into great detail about that, but it was a miracle. It was just, the whole story blows me away. But he said, "There's one thing you got to do here. God told me that you're supposed to start a ministry, and you need to not think about what that is. What's if finances is stopping you? What's keeping you from starting this ministry?" And Jason's like, "I've always sent out emails or a text group or something to a group of coaches, just encourage them in Christ and stuff for a long time,
right?
Throughout the whole 25 years, and he just happened to be one of those guys that God played in my heart. And I said, "Man, I feel like I'm supposed to do this, what I've done with you, And that night I prayed about it, and Spirit-Led Coach came to my spirit, and I bought the domain site. I don't even know how to create a website, and got all the media tags. All I had was Facebook, so I had to start an Instagram and all that. And I thought, man, there's no way this is going to happen, God. I don't know what you could do with it. I'm in the middle of the season. This is October. And my son is a marketing major and does some media stuff. So he said, "I'll help you out, Dad." And then the next thing you know, somebody walks up to it after they hear about it on Facebook, and he's like, "Man, I will help you do the website." And so then I worked with Point Guard College and NBC camps out of the West Coast, and those guys, are both saying, "Hey, we're 100% behind you." So I did a podcast with TJ Rosine and Hardwood Hoops, and then I did one with Sports Moms. I did one with another group, that listen to those other podcasts, and they're just all saying the same thing, like, "How can we help you get this ministry going?" And my goal in the whole ministry is just to equip, empower, and encourage coaches to understand, like, it's a hard battle. And I know Coach Kennedy, Joe Kennedy, and he got fired for just kneeling after a game on a football field.
I saw that. Yeah.
That's a challenge, and so how can, I know it's great to see Tony Bennett, everybody, being able to stand so strong, but who supports the high school coaches and the junior high coaches that they get attacked for doing anything? I mean, my friend obviously backed him up whenever he got fired, and now he's been blessed financially in a big way. He wouldn't have to coach if he didn't want to. That's a great story, but we don't know that it's always going to happen that way. So my goal is, FCA is a tremendous, ministry for athletes. Athletes in Action does incredible stuff with taking the ministry of athletes traveling worldwide. You have Nation of Coaches, which I, incredibly support and love what they're doing with college athletics and stuff. But my goal as Spirit-Led Coach is to help every level, every coach, every sport, to take that step out and take another step towards God. And if you do, He's going to come to you. And that power that the Holy Spirit was promised when Jesus left this earth, He said, man, I have to go so I can send that power back to you that I experienced so you can do greater than I did. We've got to learn that power is for us today. And if we can impact a coach, he can impact a player can impact a family can impact a community. And I believe it could be a ripple that just starts a wave like Promise Keepers did back in the early late 80s.
How could people find out more info, Donnie, about it? Is there a website? I know you mentioned Instagram, but is there a website people can check out? Yeah,
spiritledcoach.com.
Okay.
Everything social media wise, you can contact through that. I started a movement called SLC3 Movement on April 3rd at 3 p.m., 333. And the movement is just, like I said, a wave that I hope coaches all challenging a coach, take another step. Don't be like I was at age 30 and not get comfortable just going to church and not really experiencing a relationship with Christ. I've seen how incredible, your ministry has grown and how you've taken that step, and I'm inspired. I know if it can happen, what's happened in my life, if it can happen to me, it can happen to anybody.
Yeah.
Because, it's just I'm just lucky enough to be a simple vessel. And, it's not my ministry. It's honestly just me trying to help ignite, I think, a movement God has planned through coaches. It's the most powerful, I think, the most powerful profession, most influential profession in the United States.
Absolutely. I think coaches have the biggest impact on people's lives, maybe anyone more than, in some cases, even more than parents. Donnie, this has been great talking to you. Let's close with this and leave some. I like leaving some things that I had planned to talk about on the table because you don't want to have nothing to talk about the next time. And I think the next time is definitely going to happen here on the podcast. So let me ask you this, though. We close our podcast with this question to pretty much every guest we've had on. What are you learning from God today? What is He teaching you in this season of life where He has you right now? What are you learning from the Lord?
Fear. I hate fear. That's one thing I think it blocks more jump shots than anything. I think it takes more dreams and it takes away so many people's the things that they wake up for. It says in the last days, God will pour out His spirits and young men will dream dreams and old men will have visions. I think I might have that backwards, but it's that time. And so why are we not dreaming? Why are we not having those visions? And I think it's fear. And it says, I think 365 times or so, do not fear in the Bible. And so I was always pursuing being fearless and have my players play without any kind of fear, use their creativity, be meek, be power under control, but don't play fearful. And so what I felt like was odd about that was the fear of God. What is that? Because Moses was there in the God came down, it seemed like thunder and lightning on a mountain, and everybody started running. And Moses has that oxymoron type moment where he says, do not fear the fear of God, and you're like, what does that mean? And I heard a message on it that I felt God was really pointing to me, and it said, the fear of God is you should be terrified if there's anything standing between you and God. And we put a lot of things between us and God. And so did Satan whenever he was an archangel. And he seen himself. And instead of seeing what God had put, in him a situation, 1/3 of the angels followed that. And God gives everybody a choice. He gave Adam and Eve a choice. They let something come between them and God. So he sent his son and, to close that path. And we have a relationship. All we have to do is just draw nigh to him and seek him. And, he's waiting. He's waiting for us to do that. And what happens when we do that, everybody wants to win a game. I promise you, I got 5 rings from different kinds of championships, and they sat in my closet, in a drawer. They didn't change anything. But the joy that I've gotten through a relationship with Christ, even during the worst valleys, that joy it doesn't blink at all. I mean, it stays with me. And so that's something I feel like, as an encouragement to people out there that, whether you're a coach or you just, you love sports, you're going through life, happiness comes and goes. But joy doesn't. That joy and the peace and the happiness that you can experience as a believer in Christ is just, it's like nothing. It's there's not a better high. You can't even come close to filling your heart and that void you're looking for, like you can with Christ.
He is Donnie Bostwick, Oklahoma Wesleyan University men's basketball coach. Great stuff here. Tons of wisdom. I hope people who are listening will go back and listen again and bring a notebook, because there's lots of great stuff there. I filled up my whole prep sheet here with a bunch of quotes and wisdom here from Donnie. Listen, Coach, I really appreciate you coming on the show and us having you. It was such a great interview, and I look forward to having you back on again soon. All the best to you.
Hey, thanks. It was a big-time honor.
Many thanks to Coach Donnie Bostwick from Oklahoma Wesleyan University for joining us here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. You can give Coach a follow on Twitter at Coach_Bostwick, Bostwick, at Coach_Bostwick, and check out his website. He is the founder of Spirit Led Coach, and the website is spiritledcoach.com, spiritledcoach.com. Many thanks to Donnie for joining us here on the podcast, and many thanks to Compassion International for partnering and sponsoring this Sports Spectrum podcast. Check out the website, compassion.com/sportsspectrum, compassion.com/sportsspectrum. $38 a month allows you and I the opportunity to release a child from poverty. It's powerful, but it's simple. Go to the website. There's a list of children there. Pray about it. Choose the child that you want to sponsor, and boom, released from poverty. Your $38 goes to food, education, medical care, vocational training, all done, and this is the most important part, all done in the name of Jesus. Check it out, compassion.com/sportsspectrum, and sponsor a child today. Thanks for listening, and as always, you can find us on social media at Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Our handle is at @sports_spectrum. Check us out on our YouTube channel as well. You can subscribe there. Check out all the videos and content on our YouTube page. And all of the content that we produce at Sports Spectrum can be found at sportsspectrum.com. That's the place to go. Bookmark that site, because there is daily devotionals every day at 6 a.m. There's articles all day long on the intersection of sports and faith. There's first-person articles, increase articles from the athletes themselves 3 times a week. And every single podcast is on the website, sportsspectrum.com. I promise you won't want to miss a day at that website. And you can also subscribe to our magazine there as well. It's $18 for our quarterly magazine, a great deal, less than $20 for an entire year subscription to Sports Spectrum magazine. We'd love to have you join us in checking out our magazine. Great tool, great outreach to give to someone stories on the intersection of sports and faith. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time with a brand new episode of the Sports Spectrum podcast. Have a great rest of your day.